I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let her introduce herself and dive in because we have such limited time today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica. Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Renaud, and I am here to talk to you about MindShift. So super excited to be here and share with you just a little bit of history or background about myself. I am an executive and leadership coach, and I work within an organization called Medtronic, and I work in the global learning and leadership development space where I get the opportunity to connect with people and coach leaders. And so, outside of my job, I really just love people and love helping people kind of identify and move towards their full potential. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about what does it take to shift your mind and reframe your thoughts to drive positive outcomes. And so one of the questions that I have for you before we get started, I'm going to click here, is what are you curious about? Go ahead and type in the chat letting me know what are some things that you're curious about, and we'll see if we're able to cover those things today. Also, I want to let you know too that even though you can't interact with me directly, you'll be interacting with yourself. So make sure that you have paper available and pen to get available, because we're going to do a little bit exercise later on. Yeah, I see Jessica showing me that she has her paper. So, and I can't see the chat, Jessica. Did anything come in about some things folks are curious about? Just want to make sure, have that in mind. And you're on mute if you're talking.
I did put myself on mute just because of background noise. We live close to an airport and didn't want people to hear all the planes taking off and landing. Yeah. Okay, so we have pursuing what really matters, the thoughts of others, techniques to quiet our inner critic.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones we have so far, but feel free to keep sharing those. And
yeah.
If you click in the upper right-hand corner, if you click on session, you should be able to see those messages in the upper right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, self-coaching. So thanks for sending those in. Awesome. I can see them. So I know what you're curious about now.
Yeah. Techniques to get out of long-term funk, great resources.
Yeah. So as you look at these pictures, right, do any of these seem familiar when we think about where we are today, kind of overburdened by the technology, confused, really trying to get our thoughts out? All of these things are really where stress kind of comes into place. And so just take a look at these and see which pictures kind of resonate with you in moments that you may be having right now. Here's an interesting fact that I wanted to share with you about stress. So recent studies have linked stress to the 6 leading causes of death, right? So when you research stress, cancer, heart disease, lung accidents, liver cirrhosis, and suicide, all of those things are related, have some stress-related things to them. And so the importance of us being able to manage stress really is dependent on our health. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about cognitive reframing. And so this is a definition that I got from verywellmind.com. And they define cognitive reframing as a time-honored psychological recommended method of looking at things in ways that create less stress and promote a greater sense of peace and control. So what I will be sharing with you today is some tips around how do I create that for myself. So I'm going to get just kind of right into it, because one of the things I want us to do is to be able to find some time to practice this. So these are just 4 simple steps, and I can tell you I use these steps with myself. I use them with my children. I use them with my clients and colleagues. So the first thing you want to do is recognize your current perspective. Why is that important? What are you thinking? What story are you telling yourself? What tendencies are you finding for yourself? And then question your current perspective. What are those patterns? What overwhelms you? when do you kind of have a meltdown, right? Even though we're adults, we still have meltdowns. Um, and then really think about, how do you replace your current perspective with new thoughts? And then how do you use those new perspectives to define actions that will help you move forward? And so these are things that are really just really simple, but the thing about it is that you need to be intentional about them. And so unless you're intentional about them, it just doesn't happen. I see that Debbie puts in the space, how do I remain positive in a negative environment? Well, it really is about setting intention for yourself and taking some time to take a step back and think, okay, what am I thinking right now? What story am I telling myself? What's really true, not true? And how do I start to replace this negativity that I'm telling myself and change my perspective? And then as I'm going through it, what new perspectives do I have? And how can I create action from that? What questions come up when you see these 4 steps? If you want to just go ahead and type in chat any questions that you may have. I have a question here from Christian that says, what are the main barriers to reframe your thoughts? Um, one of the things that I'll say is the main barrier is really you. One of the things that prevents us from that makes it hard for us to change our thought patterns, I'll say that for sure, is that we have a perspective, and all of those perspectives are based on thoughts and beliefs that we've learned over the years as humans, right? So we learn things as children, we learn things from a cultural perspective, and we start to create these neural pathways that we're used to using, right? So something bad happens and we have a response to it. When you're starting to reframe, you're creating a new neural pathway that will help you start to think about things differently. And so that's why it's so hard. That's why it has to be intentional. Um, and so you have to think about that. Stress is not a bad thing. Stress sometimes can protect you, right? So it sends us signals that something is wrong. But when we stay in that space of stress, that's what causes us to really have those health issues that I talked about earlier. And so it really is about not being in the place too long and understanding when we're staying too far into stress, and needing to switch and reframe our thoughts. So everybody see the everyone see the 4 steps, because now I want to do something and I want to try it. I want us all to try it. So now let's try it. So I ask everyone the question and think about, where are you stuck? And those are, where are you stuck? Or if you're not stuck, what's something that you wanted to do that you haven't done before? I'll give you just a minute to think about that. I see someone saying writing and publishing a book. What's your current perspective of where you're stuck, or where you're wanting to move, accomplish a goal that you haven't? What's your current perspective? And so when I say that, what thoughts are you telling yourself? What's kind of going on in your brain? Let's take a few minutes to write that down. Okay, and so now that you've had the chance to think about your current perspective, which is part of step one that I showed you, the first, question your current perspective. What story are you telling yourself? What's actually true? So I see in the chat, I'm stuck trying to decide whether I want to start my own company, and my current perspective is evaluating risk. So what are you telling yourself about the risk? Are you telling yourself it's too much risk? Are you telling yourself that I can't take the risk right now? Just really think about what story you're telling yourself. And give me a few emojis letting me know if you're ready to move on to the next step. All right. So 3, what are some other perspectives that you can use? And so what I'm going to do for this particular one, I'm actually going to help you with that. So I'm going to show you a few pictures. And in those pictures, just think about what comes to mind for you when you see these pictures, and then start to think about your current situation from that perspective. And so let's see. This is the first picture that I have for you. And when you look at this, what does it say to you? And if you were to embody the view from this perspective, what would your current situation look like? I see some people saying balance. Balance is important. Yeah. What else? Have a raised hand. Lauren, did you have a question? There's a raised hand. There's a question that says, what structures and approaches would you find useful in grounding and reframing? Steve, I'll answer that question just a little bit later, and it's good to see you too on here. Repeat the second question. So a couple of things I said is, looking at this picture, Lauren, what perspective what do you think? And then if you use this perspective, how would you approach where you're stuck, the situation that you're stuck? Okay. If you're ready to go on to the next one, give me thumbs up or give me some type of emoji, and I'll show you the second picture. Emojis are coming in.
Just want to do a quick time check, Laura. You're probably about 5 or so minutes, then we'll move on to questions.
Okay. Okay, here's the second perspective. What comes to mind when you see this perspective? And how would you approach your situation from this perspective? Thumbs up when you're ready to move on to the third and final picture. And then this is the last perspective, an eagle. And again, as you're done, give me thumbs up. Wait for a few more. Okay. And then now that you have these different perspectives, ask yourself, what's possible? What actions can you create based on the new perspective? I see anything's possible. Freedom. I can take myself out of the weeds and see the whole picture. Awesome. And then finally, what is your commitment? When you think about what you've discovered about this situation and a few actions that you can take, what are you committed to do? So if anything's possible, what does that mean? And what are you committed to do to make that happen? Right. And then now I think we're at the point where we can open it up for questions.
All right. So if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat and chat those on over, and I'll make sure that Laura sees them and answers as many as we can. And while we're waiting for folks to chat in some questions, Laura, while a lot of the pictures, what was going through my head as you were going through your awesome presentation, I kept thinking about, and I'll deny if anybody says this to my mother, don't tell her, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. So whatever your perspective is, so we'll just channel my mother right now. If anybody tells her, I'm going to deny that. So if anybody knows my mother who lives in Ohio, I will totally deny it. But that's what really going through my head is, whatever our mindset is, whatever our perspective is, whether you think you can or you think you cannot, you're right.
You're right. Yeah. So a couple of questions in the chat, just because I see it, good. Structure, what are some structures and approaches do you find useful in grounding and reframing individuals and helping people reframe? And so one of the things that I will say about that is it really has to be something that resonates with you. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients and we do this work around reframing where they're stuck, it's about what is that? Where do you get your power from? So sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's an object, sometimes it's a bracelet, sometimes it's even as simple as a notebook that they all carry with them to help it. But I think after you do the work of sitting down and being intentional and thinking about how to reframe your situation, when you come out of that, what's the one takeaway that's powerful for you that you can connect with that'll drive that energy for yourself?
So I had a question. I think it just came directly to me, so I'll just read it. So in addition to everything you just said and all great ideas for how you hold yourself accountable, what's your thoughts on having an accountability partner or another person who might be going through similar experiences? Can you talk a little bit about the power of, collaboration, whether it's a mentor, friend, coach?
Yeah. It's always nice to have a friend, right? So resources are important. And finding your tribe, right? So just like you guys are here today, kind of connecting with people that have the same interests, that can support you in the way that you need to be supported, it's important. One of the things that I'll also say as well, a lot of times we think about pulling people into our tribe, but then we don't also think about looking at that circle to think about who may need to get further out because they can't support the perspective that I'm working on now. And so I would just encourage you to do those things. Who's serving you well to be able to promote you and have you go further? And then who may be weighing you down just because they're not in the space where they can support you? And so those are the things that I would recommend.
Absolutely. All right. Do you see any other questions popping up on your end?
I don't see any other. Oh, hold on. I see one.
Okay.
It says, with so many on furlough or losing their jobs, some are struggling to find their purpose because they do not know their interests. What assessments have you used to help discover interests? One of the things I feel like is really important in helping you understand your interests are values. So a lot of the work that I do with clients is really understanding your values and what's important to you. Also, there is Strength Finders, but I would, there are some good resources out there around values inventory. And I always think that's a really great place to start to understand who you are at the core, to be able to connect to the work and the actions that you want to create in the world. And so that would be my answer to that particular question.
Absolutely. And I always think around that, when, especially if folks are furloughed or unemployed, if you're not sure, maybe that's the right direction, it's always a great opportunity to dip your toe in the water and test it out. Maybe you can get something contract, part-time, volunteer, and dip your toe in the water and see if you want to dive in, or if you're like, that was good, and now we're going to take a step back from that. That was a fantasy that I no longer want to live out. So sometimes when you have time, it's a good time to try new things and see what really resonates with you.
Yeah.
All right. Do you see any other questions on your end, Ms. Laura?
I'm looking, and I don't see any other questions.
No, I think we're good. All right. So we have our next session starting in just a few minutes for track 1 and track 2. So we have track 1 is Jane Moore's Insights from a Career Coach. And then track 2 is Brianna Doherty, researching a company's culture. So feel free to check out either of those. Dip in and out as you need to throughout the day based on other commitments and things. Every session will be recorded and shared on the L&D Cares YouTube channel. So thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you, Laura. Anything you want to say to close us out?
The one thing that I will just close out with is the quote. It's kind of similar to your mom's quote, right? But your attitude and not your aptitude will determine your altitude. And so this is just a favorite quote that I have by Zig Ziglar that I'd like to leave you all with. And so thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for spending your morning with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.